of North America, South America, Asia, Europe, so on and so forth. So let's try tapping on the power key for a few seconds and see if there's any juice remaining. It says MediaTek, so very interesting. It's probably using some type of MediaTek chipset underneath the hood for the OS experience, and we have, again, a menu interface that's very similar to iOS in the early days. There's a time information, battery status as well, and then we can slide back and forth between the menus. A lot of apps on here which are not just for GPS navigation, but again, more similar to something like on a media player or an MP4 player. There's access to music, there's videos, there's a photo, ebook, Flash, so it can play back a few Flash games and apps. There's even dedicated games on here, although they are very basic, such as Snake. So a pretty fun game. The speakers on first impression are insanely loud, which may not be such a bad thing considering you want clear and precise directions for navigation, but there is no volume rocker directly on the sides here, so you probably have to dig into the menus if you want to turn down the sound. All right, so let's go out of the screen here. And again, some of these other basic games include what looks like Chinese chess. There's also Boxman, so you have to push all the boxes into these circles to win the level. Some very basic games on here, and you can obviously download more if you want to by installing them onto a memory card or connecting it to a computer. Quickly cycling through some of these other features. Calculator, wow, so this looks very similar to iOS calculators, especially with the early iPhones, and tapping on back is actually what takes you back there, so kind of clever. There's also a unit converter, again, menus interface very similar to iOS. Language support, there's many languages out of the box, and that's the FM radio. Next, here is the volume adjustment, so we can turn this up down a little bit, and the screen tap sound, we can actually make it a little bit softer as well. Basic time and date, so this again has a very iOS-like feel that allows us to change the time settings very quickly here. And very interestingly, finally on the bottom here is what we have that's called Windows CE. And if I tap on this, this immediately transitions into the Windows CE experience, which on first impression seems like something such as, let's say, Windows XP or Windows Vista, Windows 7, and it has all of these desktop-like applications on the side, including a start menu that you can tap on to take a look at additional apps. So it's actually pretty cool. It's almost like a UMPC experience. The only limitation, of course, is that this particular model doesn't have Wi-Fi, since it's basically just a GPS. But what it does have is built-in Bluetooth, so technically you can connect it to, let's say, a phone and then still have access to the internet, or you can, again, connect it maybe by USB onto a converter of sorts into Ethernet, and perhaps also connect it to internet without Wi-Fi necessarily. But very interestingly, there are a few other apps that are pre-installed on here. For instance, there's Word Viewer, there's also PowerPoint Viewer, and maybe Excel Viewer as well. So if you have an SD card or memory in here that is for presentations, for instance, you can actually tap on these apps and open them up, which is actually pretty cool. There's also Internet Explorer on here, even though it's not the best browsing experience, and again, since we don't have Wi-Fi, it's a little bit harder to browse or connect to internet right out of the box, but the application at least is on here, and you can see this is what the interface looks like. Definitely a very kind of archaic UI experience by 2018 standards, but still kind of cool. And when you're satisfied, you can actually exit out of this just by either tapping on suspend, or you can tap on this exit icon. And what that does is actually turn off the device. And so the next time that you want to go into the GPS interface, you have to tap on the power key again. So that is one potential downside. If you want to transition back and forth between the Windows CE and the GPS interface here, you have to actually physically turn the device off and turn it back on again. It's not really a seamless transition that keeps the power on at all times. But otherwise, it actually is a pretty cool kind of like secondary feature as a result of running on Windows CE, and this being really a skin that's running on top of that OS experience. So on the left here, we also have a few tabs that you can tap on to either hide the menus or put it back again, access to MP3 music at a quick key, and also access to navigation at a quick click. I can also change, let's say, the wallpaper in the background just by swiping through some of these presets. So if you want to change it from the black into a full color image, that's also possible. So say I like this particular image, you can see the background has now been changed. Now the 7-inch panel here is using just a regular TFT LCD display. It's not IPS, which means that viewing angles are a little bit weak, and the fact that it does have a little bit of glare coming from a plastic display also means that visibility may be slightly challenging if you are in really bright environments. But since it'll mostly be in your car, I think that with a reasonable amount of shade, it should be fine in terms of being able to see the images without too many problems. The screen itself is also quite sensitive, as we are doing a quick hands-on testing so far. I will say though that it is a resistive touchscreen, as you probably have guessed by the fact that it has a stylus. So it's not capacitive, not quite as lucid as on modern day smartphones, but it still is not that bad compared to older resistive devices of yesteryear. It's still a lot more responsive than what I was expecting. All right, so going into the navigation interface, which is, again, the main selling point here, it will take a few seconds to completely boot. And one of the biggest surprises in my testing with it so far is really how good the GPS antenna is. It was able to lock my position almost instantly. Even when you're indoors, you're able to very quickly find your position on a map, which is impressive. It's especially great if you're also using it as a pedestrian GPS, which it actually has the mode to be. So you can ride a bike, you can use it when walking around in a new city, and you're able to navigate your way around very easily as well. As you can see, we have full bars of reception, despite the fact that we're filming inside a building right now. The interface is also surprisingly intuitive as well as touch friendly. So all the icons are really large. You don't have to use a stylus to navigate around. And here's where you'll also find some more advanced settings for things like configuring routing options such as avoiding traffic, highways, tolls, things like that you can select through under these menus. So to access that, just tap on the settings key down below. And you can see that panning around is actually very smooth and responsive. The map seems to be loading very quickly, so the MediaTek chipset seems to be more than sufficient for powering this thing up. I'm not really even sure if it has a quad-core chipset or not. It's kind of hard to tell when I tried searching up the specific model number previously, not too much information, but again, it is very responsive in this interface. I can tap on the compass that will automatically realign to the direction that I'm pointing at with the map. I can zoom in and out using these controls. Since pinch to zoom gestures aren't available, you have to rely on using the keys on the side. This button here also changes the kind of view back experience, whether you want a flat map looking from the bottom like this, or if you want a 3D map which actually displays buildings and significant landmarks. So under destination, this is where you're able to type in, let's say, points of interest, finding address, finding places nearby. So for instance, if I tap on that, you can find by category, gas stations, parking, restaurants, accommodations, and it actually is fairly easy to use. It's actually very quick to search through points of interest. The map on here, I believe, is not necessarily 100% up to date because, again, it doesn't have Wi-Fi built on in. And this particular model, I believe, came out in late 2015, 2016. So let's do a very quick demo. I'm just going to tap into help and just play back some of these quick clips that they have provided for us. The first one, which is just a casino in Las Vegas, and it's going to pretend that we are trying to go by car, and you can see that this is what the interface is like. And again, the voice prompts themselves are indeed very clear and loud, even with the speakers at 50% right now. We can also see that it displays road information. So if there's 5 highways, for instance, it's going to display which roads that you should be on in order to successfully go out. And it tells you your street name. Again, this is the 3D visualization of the building in the distance, significant landmarks, and tells you the arrival time as well. It's able to reroute your destination very quickly if you accidentally get lost, just because, again, the antenna reception is so strong, at least in the Seattle and San Francisco regions that I tested it out with so far. I had no real complaints. It was able to very quickly reroute me and get me to the correct places. And here's one last demo, but showing a highway use scenario. So we are on a highway. You can see it shows off some cityscapes in the distance, and the visualization just resembles the road that you're in. So especially on bigger, longer highways, this is what you'll be seeing, and also the signs on the top kind of match what you'll be seeing as well as you are driving along, which is very helpful. And it smartly switches back and forth between these different types of visualizations, whether it's a regular map like you see here, or that's a highway visualization depending on what location you're on. So that's more or less it as far as our hands-on review of this very